As a beginner in tailoring, you might come across certain terms that you might wonder what they mean, what am I supposed to do. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining these terms for you, so when you do come across them, you don't get confused and wonder what they mean. Hi, my name is Sumi James. Welcome to my channel. This is the part 3 of my beginners course. So if you have not watched the part 1 and the part 2, go and watch them after watching this one, because you will find it interesting, especially if you are a beginner starting from scratch. So the first term that you will find, you might come across as a tailor, is seam line. So seam line simply means when two fabrics are brought together and stitched, okay, using a needle and a thread or whatever you might want to use to stitch it. That line that the stitch creates on that fabric is what we call a seam. This is what a seam line is. These two fabrics have been joined together using a straight stitch. So whenever you hear seam line, this is what they are talking about. So when you bring two fabrics together and stitch them, that mark that stitch creates on that fabric could be a straight line or a zigzag line or whatever pattern of stitch that you used. That is what you call a seam line or a stitch line. The second term that you might come across is seam allowance. Seam allowance is that space between your seam line and the raw edge of your fabric. Okay, so this is seam allowance. So this is that space between your seam line and the raw edge of your fabric. Okay, this is usually added so that you don't stitch on the raw edge of your fabric. When you do that, it tends to loosen, so that is why you add seam allowances. Seam allowance can also be added for amendment purposes. When you are sewing for someone that might not be in the same location for you, and you might fear that clothes will not be their size, you add about 1.5 of an inch or 2 inches, so that when they do test this cloth and it's not their size, you can easily amend it. Okay, you have space that you will use to amend it. Another word that you might come across is ease allowance. When you hear ease allowance, it simply means adding more inches to your normal body measurement. For instance, let's say that your measurement for your cloth is 1 inch, but you want to have more ease in it, you will now make it 1.5 inch. So this extra 1/2 inch added to it is what you call an ease allowance. Okay, this extra inch added to your main fabric is what you call an ease allowance. So the difference between an ease allowance and a seam allowance is an ease allowance is being added into the main measurement of your clothes, while seam allowance is being added outside. This is that extra space or extra inches added to your normal body measurements in order to bring ease and comfort to the clothes that you are making. For instance, if my bust size is 38, I might end up using 40, because maybe I don't want that cloth to be too tight on my body, so that's why I will use 40. That is what you call ease allowance. Or sometimes it can also depend on the style of the clothes you are making. If you are making a cloth that is baggy on the body, like it's loose on the body, you want it to be very loose, maybe you don't even plan to put a zipper on the clothes, you might even go as much as adding 4 inches to 5-6 inches is allowance, so that person can easily just put their hand and their head and the clothes will just go down and fix it. The third term that you might come across is backstitch. To do your backstitch, all you have to do is move your fabric in by 1/2 inch, then sew in reverse, and then start sewing forward again. So this is simply what you do for your back stitch, and this helps to secure your seam line very well so that it doesn't loosen with time. If you do not secure it like this, it might just loosen when you are wearing your clothes or doing anything. When you move your clothes around too much, it will just loosen. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning of your seam line and at the end of your seam line. So this is usually done at the beginning and at the end of each stitch line. It's usually done at the beginning and at the end of each stitch line to secure it, okay, to make sure that that stitch line does not loosen. So this simply means sewing in reverse. When you start your stitch, you sew in reverse and then start sewing again. When you get to the end, you sew in reverse again and then start sewing again, and that is it, just to secure your stitch and make sure that it does not loosen. Another term that you might come across is understitch. Understitch is going to make sure that the facing lays flat, so that when you turn it over, it will not be holding up when you wear your clothes. If you look closely to this neckline, you see that this extra allowance remaining here has been pushed up to the facing, and then an extra stitch has been done at the edge of this facing. This extra stitch done at the edge is what you call an understitch, and the purpose is just to make sure that this facing lays flat when you turn it over. So let's turn this facing over and you understand what I mean. So now we turn this facing over. Can you see? It's laying flat. It's not like this, rather it's like this. And why is because of this understitch that has been done under at the back. That is why it's now relaxing like this and it's not folding up. This is stitching at the edge of your facing to make sure that it lays flat. You add your facing to your neckline or anywhere that you might want to add it. So when you do that, you stitch at the edge so that when you turn it over, it will lay flat and not be showing at the when you wear that clothes. You don't want your facing to be showing outside, so this is why you understitch at the edge of your facing. Another word that you may come across is top stitch. This is an example of top stitch. When you hear top stitch, this is what they are talking about. This one added here is not for design, it's just to make sure that this pocket is properly secured on the trouser. So it's not for design purpose, but it can be done in a contrasting color like this or in the same color as the jeans. It doesn't matter, but this one here on the pocket is just for beautification. As you can see, it's not really necessary, it's not serving any purpose on this pocket, but it was just added so to create a design on the pocket. This is simply sewing at the front side of your clothing, okay, at the front. This is the front side of your clothing, sewing at the front side of your clothing, maybe for design purposes or just for extra security, to make sure that that place you are sewing is properly secured. Another term that you might come across is facing. So this is the work of his facing to make sure that this raw edge here is properly covered. It's going to look weird after making a skirt. You just leave it like this. The raw edge will be showing and you'll be wearing it like this. So in order to avoid that, you sew in a facing. So when you now sew in this facing, as you can see, when you turn it over, it's now looking more presentable and neat. This is also a facing for the neckline. Like I said, you can add facing to anywhere. Instead of leaving it like this, anywhere that has opening, you can add one facing to cover up the edges. So facing is an extra fabric that is being added to your clothing in order to cover the raw edge of the openings of your clothing. Like you must have heard me say facing before. So you attach it to your neckline, your armhole, excuse me, or any other place that you might want to attach. Another word that you might come across is interface. This is what an interfacing looks like. For instance, if I'm working with this fabric and I find out that it's very soft, for instance, if I want to sew something like a corset with this fabric, it's not stable enough for me, so I will need to add an extra layer of cloth to make it stronger to work with. This interfacing has a fusible side, that means a gummy side that you can just place on the wrong side of your fabric and iron it down with heat, and it will just stick to it, and you find out that your fabric is now thicker and more stable to work with facing. So this is used to stabilize a material. Maybe if you are working with a material that is very soft and moves, okay, all these types of materials, and you want it to be strong and stable, okay, you don't want it to be moving around, you add an interfacing to it. Another word that you come across is notch, and you trim it first. Before you nudge your clip, you trim. You don't want to be nudging and clipping with this long extra allowances, so you trim it off. Then you kind of start your notches. You see, these are notches. These are notches. Then clips means clipping. These are clips. Both of them serve the same purpose. The only difference is that nudging is just cutting it out natural, and for my clipping is just making straight, tiny cuts. Another word that you come across is hemming. This is what a hemming looks like. This has been folded twice to sew it down. So whenever you hear hemming, this is what it looks like. So this was folded twice because the raw edge has not been overlocked. So that is why it's important to fold it twice. But if you have an overlocker, you can also fold just once. This is also a hemming, and it's been folded once because the raw edge has been overlocked. So hemming is when the raw edge of your cloth is being folded into two and stitched down just to cover that raw edge. Another word you come across is cutting on fold. Whenever you hear cut on fold, it simply means folding your fabric into two before cutting it out. So you fold your fabric into two, get your pattern, you place on top of it, and then cut out your pattern. Okay, so that is what cutting on fold simply means. So whenever you hear cut on fold, this simply means that you should fold your fabric into two. Just fold your fabric into two. Don't cut one, fold it into two. Okay, it does not mean that you should join two separate fabrics together. It means that you should fold, cut on fold, then seam finish. When you hear seam finish, it simply means the extra touch is done at this raw edge of your fabric to make it look neater. You won't leave it like this. If you leave it like this, there is a possibility that with time it will start fraying. By fraying, I mean loosening, to start shedding. The thread will start coming out, okay, something like this. So in order to avoid that, you overlock here, or you use a French seam or any type of seam finish that you want to use. That is what seam finish means, just to make sure that your raw edges of your clothing look neat. Gathering. To gather this fabric, all I have to do is sew it down with a loose stitch to make sure that your machine stitch is loose. You can also use your hand to gather your fabric. Just use your hand needle and sew it down loosely. If you want to gather your fabric, make sure that you don't back stitch at the beginning. Okay, so let me show you how to gather your stitch. Now you start gathering it by drawing the thread at the back, not the one at the front, but the one at the back. So this is me gathering the fabric now to fit a particular size of any cloth I want it to fit. Make sure you take this easy when doing it so that your thread does not snap. If it snaps, you might have to start from the beginning again, so be careful when doing this. And this is what, depending on the size I want this fabric to be, this is what a gathering looks like. Okay, this is an example of what a gathering looks like. So this simply means reducing a larger fabric in order to fit into a smaller size. For instance, if you are making a puff sleeve, a puffy sleeve, and your wrist is like 12 inches, you might cut a band that is 12 inches in size, and then you now use maybe slash and spread pattern to cut the other side of the fabric. Maybe you cut like 22, you now reduce that 22 inches to fit into the 12 inches that is your normal wrist circumference. So that is what gathering is. It's just to reduce a larger fabric, a larger length of a fabric to fit into a smaller size. Another term that you might come across is wrong side and right. When you hear wrong side and right side of clothes, it simply means the back and the front of your clothes. So the back is the wrong side and the front is the right side. So when you are sewing and you hear cut on wrong side or join two right sides together, this means just fold your fabric and cut it on the wrong side, or make that marking on the wrong side of your fabric. Or when you hear right side facing each other, this means the front part of your clothes, the good side of your clothes. Another word that you might come across is that. So this is what a dart looks like. Take about 1 inch on the front of your clothes and sew it down to about 4 to 5 inches. The purpose of adding this dart is just to make sure that your clothes doesn't bulge up when you are wearing it, your skirt doesn't bulge up when you are wearing it. The front side will lay flat and fit very well. So that's the purpose of adding this dart to your skirts. So that is when you take out some inches of your clothing in order to make that side lay flat or to make it fit better. For instance, if you are making a skirt, and you might see that a skirt usually tends to bulge at the waistline, okay, at the back or at the front. After sewing it, you might have this puffy thing at the lower belly waistline. So you take out maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches of that. You take out the darts there. So just make sure that when you wear that clothes, it will lay flat on your belly and it will not be bulging up. That is it. These are the various basic terms that you might come across when sewing. With time, you will see these terms and you might get more familiar with it by using it and hearing it more often. So thank you for watching this video. If you find it helpful, please like, comment, share and subscribe.